Yeah.
Well, thank you everyone for coming, and what I'd like to do is I'd like to make a few informal comments first, and then I do have a prepared statement that I will read, and I would then welcome any questions from anyone in the audience after I've made my short presentation, which will be, I would say, less than 10 minutes. But let me begin from a historical perspective. And that is last evening at about 6:30, I received a phone call from a friend of mine asking if I had seen the flyer that he had just received, and he identified it as coming from the Walls campaign, which is not technically correct, as we quickly learned, because it came out from the Minnesota Democratic Party. And I said, no, I have not seen it, but anyway, this is what the flyer looks like on one side, and what the flyer looks like on the other side. And what this flyer says, and I quote on the one side, Alan Quist wants to end Medicare, and on the other side it says, Alan Quist's extreme agenda for Medicare, he wants to end it forever. And obviously to say I want to end Medicare forever is about as strong a statement as you can make. Now the reason that this flyer concerned me is because these statements are absolutely, totally false. And the statements are the direct opposite of my own position, which is we have to get our financial house in order to protect Medicare and Social Security and veterans benefits. So I intended to hold a press conference asking Mr. Walls to disavow this flyer. But later in the evening, I learned that Mr. Walls' latest FEC report revealed that his campaign transferred $135,000 from the Walls campaign to the Minnesota State DFL Party. So this flyer is in fact funded, directly or indirectly, but in fact funded by Mr. Walls. And so the flyer statement is not only absolutely false, it is also deceptive, because it gives the impression that this has been put out by the DFL party, when in fact is funded by Mr. Walls. And so he has to take full responsibility for the lies that are in this flyer. What is said here that I want to end Medicare is absolutely, totally false. By the way, there are some footnotes on the flyer. My staff has checked out the footnotes. I have a summary of the footnotes here in about these 20 pages. And let me just say, there's no substance whatsoever to the footnotes. The footnotes, too, simply give the facade of documentation when there is no documentation for the position of the flyer that I supposedly want to end Medicare. So having said that, I'd like to read my prepared statement, and then I would be happy to respond to any questions. Tim Walls has launched an entirely false attack on my position on Medicare while trying to hide his dishonesty behind the Minnesota DFL party. Specifically, the Walls flyer states, quote, Alan Quist wants to end Medicare, unquote, and the flyer also says, Alan Quist's extreme agenda for Medicare, he wants to end it forever. And again, I want to underscore the fact that you could not make a stronger statement than this than to say Alan Quist wants to end Medicare forever. These Walls DFL statements are totally false. When I announced the press conference yesterday, I intended to call on Mr. Walls to disavow and repudiate the flyer. But last evening I learned that the last Walls FEC report revealed that Tim Walls transferred $135,000 to the state DFL party and had done so within the last 17 days. By the way, I have a copy of the FEC report with me. If anybody wants to see that, I would be happy to produce it. That means that Tim Walz has essentially paid for this false advertising. Tim Walz cannot repudiate what he has paid for, so he must take full responsibility for the outright falsehoods in this mailing. By hiding behind the DFL, Mr. Walz is once again pretending to be someone he is not. The flyer is a desperate, last-minute smear attack that attempts to rescue Mr. Walz's failing campaign while trying to hide the fact that Tim Walz is himself responsible for the falsehoods. Tim Walz's attack is both false and deceitful. Mr. Walz says he wants to be transparent. He wants government to be transparent, but he is not willing to be transparent in his own political campaign. My consistent and public position is to protect Social Security and Medicare. In fact, I have made the protection of Social Security and Medicare a primary focus of my campaign. On numerous occasions, I have said that the federal government must put its financial house in order so that it has the financial means to meet its commitments, including commitments to Social Security and Medicare. This Walz flyer represents the worst of Washington politics. I am calling on all First District voters to repudiate this kind of deceit and dishonesty by voting Mr. Walz out of office on November 6th. So that is my statement. Let me just add very quickly, I have been involved in politics a long time. I've seen a lot of flyers. I've seen a lot of campaign materials. I have never seen anything as bad as this. This is the ultimate smear campaign piece. And obviously, it cannot go unchallenged. Having said that, I welcome any questions, whether from the media or from the audience. Mark?
What is your position on the voucher approach for younger people, people under 55?
You know, I've never supported that. And let me clarify that, Mark, by saying that in the part of the state where I come from, which is rural St. Peter, I can buy and sell $100,000 worth of commodities by word of mouth. And up until just a few years ago, I used to do that, and I would write down the amount, the price, and the delivery date, no contract. For me, agreements are everything. And we have an agreement, the federal government has an agreement with the public on both Social Security and Medicare, and I am totally committed to keeping those agreements. And I'm not a fan of the Ryan plan, but I am a fan of keeping our agreements.
So you're saying you wouldn't change current Medicare benefits even for the youngest Americans?
Well, let me put it this way, new people coming on the system, you know, I think there might be room to perhaps, new people, 18, whatever, I'm talking about very young, for some new contracts essentially. But I don't foresee changing the agreements we have with the people that are on. Yes?
Is government stealing from Medicare, to put it other places?
You know, there aren't very many questions that I get that I'm not sure how to answer, but that would be one. I guess where I am really concerned is in the Social Security Trust Fund, which has a big IOU.
Okay.
And I think that is an unacceptable practice.
So why does it have an IOU? Where are those funds going? Or is it just not keeping up? If everybody that pays into Social Security,
Right.
If that fund is kept up
Right.
only for people, on Social Security, to get,
Right.
it shouldn't have an IOU.
I couldn't agree more. It should not have an IOU, but it does.
Okay.
Yeah, and there is no money in it. Now, let me clarify, by federal law, the money that the Treasury borrows from the Social Security Trust Fund and other retirement accounts must be compensated by interest being paid by the Treasury to the trust fund. So there is interest being paid, but there is no money there. It is a big IOU. And so is this at risk down the road from people who are now going to say, well, we just don't have enough money? I believe it is at risk. And I believe that there needs to be an actual fund. Other questions, John?
We don't really know what free press article they're referring to in the notes at this point.
Yeah.
But it seems like it seems like what they're trying to imply is that it seems like that you had said that you support the Republican Study Committee, and possibly that they're trying to say somewhere in their 2013 budget that they would have a voucher-style system. Does that mean you would repudiate the Republican Study Committee if it's proven to have a voucher system?
Well, I've never subscribed to any of the details in the study committee's proposal. I have subscribed to the overall goal of balancing the budget, but I've never subscribed to any details, nor have I ever subscribed to Paul Ryan's Medicare plan. But regardless of that, this flyer says that I want to end Medicare, okay, quote unquote. This flyer says Alan Quist, the Quist Extreme Agenda for Medicare, he wants to end it forever. And so what I want to focus on is the obviously, outrageously false statement that I want to end Medicare. Because that is just absolutely absurd. I do not want to end Medicare, and I'm very interested in protecting it. So what this flyer does is it takes my position and goes 180 degrees in the opposite direction and says that my position is the total opposite of my real position and my real conviction. And that is as bad as it gets. Yes?
Are you going to be able to get this out to all of the first district?
Well, no. I mean, there's no way to get it out to all of the first districts. So this may be a calculated risk on the part of the Walz campaign. I expect they knew I was going to call them to account for putting out information that is false. They may have suspected I would call them to account for doing this in a devious way, of having the state party's name on it instead of Mr. Walz's. They probably knew I would do that. But they may well be counting on however many households, and let me guess, 50,000, I mean it's only a guess, households receiving this at a time when time doesn't allow me to get contrary information into the hands of the household. So it may well be, now I'm always going to say may, because when you ask me kind of question that you asked, I can only give you my opinion. But they may think they have more to gain from this than to lose. But what I say, regardless, nothing justifies putting out false information.
I would presume the media is going to get it out as much as they can here, and I know you were in Rochester this morning.
Right.
I presume the media, I'm only presuming, you know.
First you ask for my opinions, then you ask for me to predict the future. And I'm going from thin ice to open water. I'm just not sure.
I understand.
I'm just not sure if I can go there. I'm always very reluctant to say what's going to happen. Yes.
It looks like there's a couple of different facts, so to speak, that they're combining into one thing in the ad. Are any of the things listed separately, are any of them accurate in any way?
Well, I do not support any cuts in Medicare, okay? And when you have, many of these footnotes are to the Ryan plan, which I don't support. And so the footnotes are a smokescreen. They're intended to give the impression of documentation to support what's said, and I assure you, they do not. But if anyone wants to read through, or we can email you, analysis of all their documentation, we would be happy to do that. But their documentation does not justify what the flyer says. And like I say, I'm focusing on the strong statement that I want to end Medicare. because that's the most, that's the, what should I say?